Hello everyone, this is G and I hope that you're all doing well. I've had a pretty long day today. I've actually been working on this video all day. So I hope you guys enjoy it. As always, I'm so thankful for everybody who has subscribed, and whether you've been here uh, from the first video or even from before I was making videos, or whether you're in the middle or whether you're a newer person. I hope that you continue to enjoy the content, and I hope that you're doing well. So, today's video is going to be about a very disturbing trend that I keep seeing more and more in various sorts of media, and just my very nuanced take on it. So, let's get into it. Jimmy Kimmel, Jenny Slate, Babs Tarr, Gone with the Wind. What do these four have in common? Well, they've been accused recently of blackface, right? Of being done in blackface, or otherwise being culturally insensitive, right, to African American people, right, and to the African American experience. Now, I've done individual videos about each of these particular instances, and there are many more out there, to be fair. For example, I heard that Jenna Marbles, she's not someone I'm too familiar with, but I was hearing from Clownfish TV that she essentially canceled herself because of something. She was accused of blackface, or she did blackface or something. And then, of course, there was another voice actor. I believe the voice actor for the character of Cleveland Brown. I'm not too familiar with the show or the character, but apparently that character, or that voice actor for the character, is now stepping away, although he created the character, because he is white and the character is black, right? So we've been seeing this recently, these people stepping away or otherwise being accused or being canceled because of these accusations of blackface and brownface, or otherwise being culturally insensitive to African Americans, right? Especially now in this time of great unrest, right, and volatile reactive emotion because of the death of George Floyd and police brutality and the protests and the riots and all this other stuff that I've made plenty of videos about it, and am not going to go into great detail here. If you want my opinions on those things, please check out those videos. So, here's my thing. Here's what I'm worried about, and here's what honestly scares me. We are, in my opinion, heading back to segregation. And I am not for that. I am not playing this segregation game. Okay, segregation, A, is just never a good thing. But two, especially if you want to look at it in the context of American history, right? Segregation always, always disfavored African Americans. If you are that concerned about black lives, you need to understand that segregation always hurt black people, right? That phrase and that legal, I guess, standard or finding of separate but equal, right? It wasn't true. That was the point. Black schools and white schools back there were not separate but equal. The black schools were consistently underperforming and just plain worse than the white schools. That's why we desegregated. That's why legally, right, we started busing kids and putting black kids in white schools. And if you think about it from the perspective of people who really lived through that period, right, through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even going into the 80s in some instances, right, where they had to break down segregation, right, where they had to actively desegregate and learn to integrate, right, just how much of a big deal that was, right, and how dangerous really that was for a lot of people, right? Kids, they're like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, little black kids, right, going to these white schools. Not only are they being met with, hostility and animosity, which is bad enough when you're a child, right, but they also need National Guardsmen. They need National Guardsmen, right, to bring them to these schools and to basically protect them. That's how serious it was back then, right? But despite the risk, despite the social and cultural tension which there was a lot of. It's not as if um, desegregation and integration happened easily or without incident. It did not, but we did it. And you know why we did it? Because we realized that integration, integration was what was going to help people. And in particular, if it's about the black community, we knew that integration, right, was going to help us. Not keeping us separate, not keeping us separate, not building these walls, not saying, you Negroes over here. I said the word Negro. Not you Negroes or you coloreds over here and you whites over there. But people coming together as one, right? Coming together with a commonality. Integration, not segregation. And I don't want to head back to segregation. It's not going to help anybody. More importantly, well, not more importantly, but I should say, in addition, right, we had media coming out in the 60s, right, such as Star Trek, that was challenging people's perceptions and views socially through entertainment, right? One of the first shows to show a Russian, at least for American TV audiences, right, to show a Russian uh, in a positive light. Remember, 1966, still very much the height of the Cold War, very much a possibility that the U.S. and Russia may go to war. People were not sure at the time. And yet you had a TV show that was this idyllic vision of the future, right? That humanity had overcome all the stupidity that was keeping us apart at the time. And you had positive depictions of women. You had positive depictions of Scots, like Mr. Scott, right? Scotty. You had positive depictions of Russians, right? Who, for many Americans at the time, would have been a ideological enemy. You had positive depictions of black women, right? As Whoopi Goldberg is often mentioned when she talks about the character of Uhura and how much that character meant to her, right? She's always mentioned how it was, she was one of the first characters that she saw on TV, and she went to her mother. She was like, "Mom, look, it's a black lady on TV, and she's not a maid," right? And then, of course, you had Mr. Sulu, right? As one of the first, especially I would say for like modern American cinema and or just TV in general, entertainment in general, and especially prior to the rise and popularity of Bruce Lee in the 70s, right? So this is a good what? Maybe at least maybe 5 to 10 years, right? Prior to Bruce's fame, at least, if not more. And you're seeing Mr. Sulu, right? A heroic, competent Asian man. He's not played as a fool, he's not played as weak, and he's not played as evil, right? Played, of course, by George Takei, right? And here's the thing. Even back then, in the 60s, right, as I said earlier, Star Trek was challenging social norms. And here's the thing. If they weren't challenging social norms, if they weren't challenging people's perceptions, such as with this, to my knowledge, it's the first interracial kiss, at least on American TV. I don't know about TV in other countries, but at least it seems to be, from what I've read, for us Americans, this was the first, or at least one of the first, interracial kisses on TV, especially for a big TV show. And although it may seem inconsequential now, it was a big fracking deal back then, right? To the point where, believe it or not, there were people on both sides. There were white people and black people, right, who were not for this, right? But as I remember, I think it was the woman who played Uhura, Nichelle Nichols, right? I believe she mentioned one time that she got a letter. That she got a letter, and from what she says, was a white man. White man who was a fan of the show wrote her a letter about this scene, right? And in the letter, he mentions that he's not for the mixing of the races. From a social perspective, he doesn't agree with it at all, right? But he also acknowledged that he was like, look, Kirk's a hot-blooded man. Uhura's a beautiful woman. He can't help himself, right? He understood at least on that part, right? Maybe nothing else. Maybe he again, as a social issue or a social trend, right, whatnot, he was completely against it. But even he had to acknowledge, like, look, she's a beautiful woman. What do you expect a man to do, right? And here's the thing, even small stuff like that helps break barriers down. And if you don't have this kiss in the 1960s, then guess what? Star Trek can't do this kiss in the 1990s, which was quite controversial for its day. I remember watching the episode and being very confused. But then again, I was a child. Speaking of girl on girl kisses in the 1990s, Xena and Gabrielle say hi. But continuing, right? We had media such as Star Wars, which introduced us to, of course, over the years, a whole bevy of characters from different races and planets and all this other stuff, right? But it also introduced us to Lando Calrissian. And we have the Rocky films, right, which showed us the friendship and the fierce rivalry between Rocky Marciano and Muhammad Ali. Oops, sorry, I take that back. What I mean is Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed, right? And this friendship between these two men from different backgrounds, different fighting styles, obviously different races, right? Rivals turned friends. And then, of course, we have comics and TV shows such as X-Men, right? Which has always been diverse. It was designed to be diverse, especially when they got that, at the time, all new, all different reboot, which introduced characters like Storm and Wolverine and whatnot, right? And then, of course, we had Justice League, right? Another show that practiced diversity by simply featuring it and giving characters their own story arcs and showing them working together. Another one, of course, is my personal favorite of the 1990s, Gargoyles, right? You have a biracial woman as the lead, as the female lead of the show in 1994, and no one said a word, positive or negative. That's the best thing you can get, in my opinion. Then, of course, you have Power Rangers, right? Which is actually the American adaptation of a Japanese TV show known as Super Sentai, which has been going on since the 70s, I think, at least. But as we can see here, quite a diverse cast. You have an Asian woman, you have a black guy, you have different people, different ages, right? And they all came together for one thing, right? To defeat Rita, right? They all were brought together under Zordon, right? Alpha, find me 5 teenagers with attitude. And what does he do? He finds like the 5 nicest kids around. Like the baddest dude was like Tommy, and he was brainwashed, right? So you had shows like this. It shows, even as cheesy as it was, like Captain Planet, right? And you see all these, look at the Planeteers, right? You had Wheeler, who's the loud American. You have Guy, who's the Asian girl. You have Linka, who I think she's Russian, right? You had Mati, who was the heart. He was the heart of the team, and he was Mexican. You had Kwame, he was Earth, and he was African, right? But they all came together, and what happened, right? With your powers combined, I am Captain Planet. Go Planet, and all this other stuff. And although she's not featured here, right? You have Gaia, who's the spirit of the Earth, who's voiced by Whoopi Goldberg, right? So I grew up with media that preached that diversity was a strength, that we could come together despite our differences, right? If you're a video game fan, right, you no doubt know that many games and systems of yesteryear, many games and systems today, and many games and systems moving into the future come from Japan. Maybe if you are of a certain age, you remember playing Street Fighter 2 as a little kid, or as an adult, whatever age that you were. Maybe you remember playing fighting games such as Mortal Kombat, or the King of Fighters, or Tekken, and the various sequels to that game, or Soul Calibur, or a whole bevy of other games, Eternal Champions, Shaq Fu, whatever it is, right? Maybe you remember playing the original Final Fantasy VII, or perhaps you're playing Final Fantasy VII, or you're revisiting Final Fantasy VII through the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which has come out recently and has received very good reviews. As we can see, there's a whole diversity of characters in Final Fantasy VII. Men, women, chocomogs, a friggin' Native American dog. So many different types. and no one complained. No one said anything, right? Maybe you're like me and you were a pro wrestling fan, or you're still a pro wrestling fan. Maybe you remember the Monday Night Wars, right? WWF versus WCW. Maybe you remember the rise of superstars such as Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Maybe you remember things like DX doing their, I guess you'd say now, infamous parody of the Nation of Domination, which was an all black stable that had a token white man in the group in the form of Owen Hart. Maybe you remember this skit and you remember X Pac. X Pac, Sean Waltman, the skinny dude, right? In blackface, playing Mark Henry, who was the world's strongest man, because he's a former Olympian, and is very, 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 very big. Mark Henry's a lot of things. Small ain't it. Yet, right, this was considered funny. This was considered funny. If a bit profane, because again, it's the 1990s, it's the Attitude Era. Everything was profane. But this was considered all fine and well, and no one accused Sean Waltman, X-Pac, of racism. And keep in mind, pro wrestling has had plenty of instances of racially insensitive everything. It kind of works because of the fact that it's meant to be uncouth and lowbrow. So it's always, at least back in the day, pushing the envelope on what is considered decent, right? But again, this is what, 1997, 1998, and again, no one flipped their wig. No one tried to cancel X Pac or Vince. People tried to censor Vince, but no one tried to cancel Vince. Right? Maybe you were watching WCW like I was at the time, and you remember seeing such international stars such as Rey Mysterio Jr. and Eddie Guerrero and the Ultimo Dragon. See, WCW was probably one of the few times, especially if you were a young wrestling fan, you were going to see international talent regularly on display because American companies did not really promote these type of wrestlers consistently because they're not what traditionally works in American pro wrestling. Right? American pro wrestling is the big beefy man, right? The big beefy guy. These wrestlers tend to not be that, right? They're shorter, they're slimmer, their fighting style is very fast paced, but WCW regularly featured this. They had one of the best cruiserweight divisions of the time, possibly ever, at least in the American wrestling circuit, because they were willing to bring in international talent. And speaking of international talent, I remember the night Ultimo Dragon came out. I think it was an episode of Thunder. I remember the night he came out draped in all these belts. This is 10 belts on this man. I remember when he came out draped in them. I was like, this is the coolest man alive. I love you. You think I cared he was Japanese? No, I was like, the Ultimo Dragon is the champion of champions. He owns every belt. That's all I cared about. Because that's all that mattered. It didn't matter he was Japanese. I didn't care about Sonny Ono. All that mattered was here was this amazing, talented man coming out literally dripping in gold. I loved it. I loved it. Right? And speaking of wrestling, since I haven't done a video on it, I figured I'd bring it up now. Not earlier this month, last month, the former pro wrestler, I think, Shad Gaspard, right, passed away in a swimming accident, and he died trying to save his son. To my knowledge, his son is at least physically okay. I don't know about mentally, given they just lost his father, but to my knowledge, the boy was saved. So my heart and my prayers go out to his son and his wife and his family. And while I personally never liked the gimmick of Crime Time, because yes, I did find it offensive, I never had an issue with the man himself. He was, for all of that I know of, a sincerely stand-up dude. And, his loss, his passing is a tragedy. It's always a tragedy, but especially in pro wrestling because this was an honest accident. Most of the time when someone dies in pro wrestling, it's in a way by their own hand. It's either by suicide or it's a result of years of hard living and drug abuse. And and whatnot, right? So it's kind of self-destructive. But Shad wasn't that. Shad was not that, and it's a tragedy that he lost his life in such a way. But at the very least, he died saving his son. So you know, rest in power, Shad, and may your family always know and remember and love you. May your son remember you, and I will certainly have at least for myself, if nothing else, I'll have the Gaspard family in my prayers. Now, maybe you're a sports fan like myself, right? Maybe you remember, maybe you're old enough to remember when Jordan's Bulls were dominating basketball in the 1990s. Or perhaps you've seen the Netflix documentary, right? What is it? The Last Dance, I think it is. That's what it's called, right? Maybe you remember that, or you've seen that documentary. Maybe you remember Kobe and Shaq's Laker team. Well, you know what these two have in common? Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson, who's quite obviously a white man. Phil Jackson, who used to play for the Knicks. I believe he played power forward for the Knicks, and on the last team the Knicks ever produced that actually won a championship for the 1970s. I believe Phil was the power forward on that team, the starting power forward. But what he's best known for is being a coach. And he coached Jordan, he coached Kobe, he coached Shaq, right? And here's this white man coaching these black players to victory, and he's known as the Zen Master. So that would be kind of little Japanese stuff in here, right? Again, the desegregation, I would say, at work. Maybe you remember the rise of Dirk Nowitzki, right? German basketball player. Maybe you're like me, and you remember when Dirk and his Mavericks did what many thought was impossible and defeated LeBron James and his Miami Heat and won his first and last NBA championship. Maybe like me, your voice went hoarse, cheering when they won. Right? Maybe you're a fan of the San Antonio Spurs, who have long been known to have an incredibly international roster and whose core three starting players for 20 years were number 21, Tim Duncan, who's from the U.S. Virgin Islands, number 9, Tony Parker, who's from France, and number 20, Manu Ginobili, who's Argentinian, and who've all played for 20 years or around 20 years under coach Greg Popovich. And Greg Popovich brought on assistant coach Becky Hammond, who is a former WNBA player, and who many state is one of the best coaches just in the league in general, and who some think, we'll never know until it happens, but who some think might actually replace Greg Popovich as head coach of the Spurs should the man ever retire. Who knows? I hope that if that's what she wants and what Pop wants, and if she's the best person for the job, I'd say great, because I've heard nothing but amazing things about her as a coach. Maybe you are like myself, a New Yorker. Maybe you're a Knicks fan, and you remember the Linsanity run of 2012, right? Maybe like me, you were happy to see him come back a few years later as a member of the Nets. In fact, a my former supervisor at work, a man named Eugene, who's interesting enough, he's Asian. He's a very tall Korean man. And he and I, when we first met years ago, we bonded over basketball, and we bonded over Jeremy Lin. And so when Jeremy ended up coming back to New York as a member of the Brooklyn Nets, Eugene got me his jersey. So that's always going to be a special memory for me, and I have Jeremy Lin to thank for that. Eugene and I wouldn't have had much to talk about if it weren't for the fact that we were both basketball fans and we were both Lin fans. So maybe you're like me, and you're happy that Jeremy Lin last year got his NBA ring, right? He can now say he's an NBA champion because he was part of the squad of the Raptors squad that was led by former Spurs player, I would say franchise player, in fact, and centerpiece, Kawhi Leonard, who led the Raptors to victory last year and got his second ring, if I remember correctly, and who's now a member of the Clippers. But because of Kawhi, Jeremy Lin has a ring, right? More importantly, Jeremy Lin has a ring before Carmelo Anthony. If you remember the drama that was happening behind the scenes when Jeremy Lin ended up going to the Rockets, you will understand why I am very happy that Jeremy Lin got a ring before Carmelo Anthony. But anyhow, my point in all of these examples is that diversity is a strength. It really is, right? Diversity is a strength. It's not a bad thing when it's done honestly, when it comes about organically, when it isn't forced, and when it has what's what I'm looking for? I guess you would say right intentions, right? And those intentions are pursued in a productive manner. When you bring people of different groups together, right, whatever those groups may be, and you bring them in with a focus on a particular goal, right? Diversity will bring you closer to that goal, and diversity will make you stronger than any divisiveness and any segregation and any stay in your lane no matter what could ever do, right? Here's the thing though, for diversity to be a strength, it also has to be fueled with, and to quote Queen Latifah herself, unity, unity. We need unity in these things. And while I disagree quite strongly with Queen Latifah when it comes to her views on Gone with the Wind and her calling for it to basically be buried in the vault because of how the actress who played the slave character was treated, back in the 40s, I will agree with Queen this much. We need unity. Diversity is a strength because unity is a strength. If we have diversity, but we're constantly fighting with each other, we get what we're constantly seeing in the world at the moment. Nothing but self-destructive behavior which tears people down instead of building them up. If we continue down this road, then here's what's going to happen. We're going to lose our iconic black heroes. We're going to lose characters like Spawn, because Spawn, while created by a white man in Todd McFarlane, the character himself, right, is African American. And I'm telling you, sooner or later, we are going to have people demand that Todd McFarlane not write or not draw for Spawn, right, or God forbid, give up his creator rights to the character into the comics, because Todd is white and Al Simmons, Spawn, is black, and somehow a white man cannot understand the black experience. This is not something I want to happen. Todd created an amazing, well-liked, beloved character who, heck, just recently found himself in a Mortal Kombat game. Officially this time. Previously, he was in the game as Scorpion, and we all know this. But now he's in the game officially. And even I, who is not a big fan of these guest characters, especially in Mortal Kombat, because they just seem so random to me. When Spawn was introduced, I was like, oh my god, this is perfect. And I still maintain that. For all the issues I have with that game, Spawn was an amazing addition. We wouldn't have Spawn in the first place if it were not for Todd McFarlane, who's white. Yes, a white man created a black character, and he did a damn good job. Right? If we continue down this road, we are going to lose characters like Storm, the iconic Storm of the X-Men, right? Iconic to Marvel, iconic to the X-Men, iconic to comics itself. And we're going to lose her if we keep going down this segregation road, if we keep playing the segregation game and telling people, you must stay in your lane. you can't understand a man or a woman or a white person or a black person or an Asian person or anything else because you are not that. This is what's going to happen. We are going to lose Storm. We're going to lose Black Panther. We're going to lose Monica Rambeau, the OG, original, first woman to be Captain Marvel. Not Carol Danvers. Speaking of which, the experiment has failed, Marvel. It has failed. Stop. No one likes Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. No one. Absolutely no one. Your books have gone nowhere. And before you bring up the film still got panned as a C. Okay? There's a lot more to success than just money. This does not work. She's not a good character for Captain Marvel. Please just put her back in her old costume. Give her her old personality and her old name back. Okay? The blonde bombshell, right? With the tragic heroine, with a mix of sexy tomboy, with a mix of fierce warrior, right? That's what we want. That's what a lot of comic fans, myself included, want. And as for Kamala Khan, just give her her own name of Jersey Girl and tell new stories, please. But anyway, as I was saying, we're going to lose characters like Luke Cage, the hero for hire. If you are a DC fan, we're going to lose characters like Vixen. By the way, this cover is dope. I love this. This is just so intense. I love it. Right? But we're going to lose characters like Vixen. We're going to lose characters like Nubia. Speaking of Nubia, I don't know who in the world this lady is, but this ain't Nubia. She calls herself a real one, so maybe she's an Enzo Amore fan, but she's not Nubia. That is not Nubia. Right? And here's the reason why we're going to lose these characters. We're going to lose these characters because white people make these characters. Nearly every character, I think every character, I'll always allow a possibility that maybe I'm wrong, but I think that nearly, if not all, of these characters that I just went through have been created by men in some fashion. Right? Written by men, drawn by men, promoted in comic book companies, ran by men, in particular white men. It's white men who are being creative enough and diverse enough to take a risk and create characters outside of themselves, whether it's females, whether it's blacks, whether it's Asians, whether it's Latinos, or anything else. It's the white creators that are doing this. Okay, again, Storm, Black Panther, Monica Rambeau, all Marvel characters. Guess who was the head honcho at Marvel for the vast majority of his time there? Stan Lee. Stan is not black. Stan was not a woman. And here's the thing. When you do this segregation stuff, you're going to scare white creators into not taking those chances, because you're going to make them constantly second guess themselves and wonder, am I being culturally insensitive? Could I really understand? They're going to second guess themselves so much that they're going to say, you know what? It's too much of a risk. I'll just write what I know, which will just be another white man. Right? And here's the thing. Not only does this, in my opinion, this move towards segregation, which we literally spent, at least 4 decades, if not more, tearing down, right? Not only is it going to stifle white creators, right? Guess what? Our black creators, in my opinion, most of them, are not going to step up. Black creators, in my experience, just don't make characters like these. Right? There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't seem to be what black creators are into making. Right? As I told one person online who was debating me about this, where is Tyler Perry with the Medea becomes a vampire, or Medea becomes a wizard, or Medea becomes a superhero film or comic or anything else? Remember, Tyler Perry has his own studio. He's always talking about it, right? Tyler Perry Studios. He can make whatever he wants. Ask him why he is not widening out in his themes instead of just doing the basically diary of a mad black woman 100 times over. It's pretty much what he does. It's all he does. Why aren't we asking our black creators? If you are one of these people who is FUBU, right, for us, by us, and you claim that Hollywood is racist, Hollywood doesn't want to hear from black people, or is trying to hold us down. If you're one of these, oh, it's the man holding us back. Well then, to you, to those type of people, tell me why you are not holding your black creators accountable. Why aren't you holding Tyler Perry accountable? Why aren't you holding Jordan Peele accountable? Right? Jordan Peele makes movies. Didn't he make? I don't think it was it Knives Out? No. It was Get Out. I think Ryan Johnson is Knives Out, but I think that Jordan Peele did Get Out, right? And that was well received. And I think he's also the guy who wanted to do a reboot of Gargoyles. I don't want Gargoyles back at this time because of the climate that we're in, right? But still, just be given that he's a creator, why aren't black people, black comic fans, film fans, whatever it is, why aren't they going to these black creators and going, hey, why won't you tell a science fiction story, right? Or a wizard story, or a vampire story, or a superhero story? Why won't you create original characters, right? FUBU, for us, by us. Why hasn't any black creator, at least that I know of as of yet, tried to bring back or do their own version of Milestone Comics, which was, made for, right, for us, by us, right? Probably the best known creation from Milestone is probably Static Shock, who was later absorbed into DC once Milestone collapsed, right? But people are always constantly, especially now, rebooting stuff and bringing stuff back, so why not do that? If you're so upset with what you think is lacking in Hollywood, whether it be film roles or voice acting roles or whatever it is, why don't you, since you are so damned upset and unhappy, do something like make your own work? Or again, hold your black creators accountable. Or try to bring back something like Milestone Comics. But you see, these people don't want to do that. They don't want to do that because it's too damned hard. Tyler Perry ain't going to make a Medea vampire film, which is my point. Anyhow, right, these same people, at least in my estimation, in most cases, these people are the same ones who think that taking an iconic black face off of a syrup bottle, right, or off of a box of rice with Uncle Ben's, or the cream of wheat guy, that this will somehow advance the black cause or make black people's lives better. No, it won't. All you're doing is quite literally erasing black people, at least from food labels. Very few black faces, at least in America, on food labels, and you want to take them away because you are suddenly concerned about the mammy stereotype. Please cry me a river somewhere else. As I've said and keep saying, what we need, if we're going to move forward in any progressive, healthy way, we need love and we need unity. And Marvel, you need to bring this pairing back. You cannot do this to me. You cannot make me love this as a child and then not bring it back or not follow through with it when I'm an adult. Stop playing with my emotions. But seriously, this is what we need. We need to come together in love, not necessarily romantic love, though that will certainly happen too. But we need to come together in love and in unity if we are going to move forward in a healthy way. We need to integrate. See how their hands are interlocked? We need to integrate, not segregate. Come together, not apart. Now I know some may say, well, Gene, you're referencing cartoons and comic books. Well, guess what? I can reference real life as well. In fact, I can reference my own life. You see this picture? This picture was taken when I was in college. I was part of a web radio show called Wrestling on the Rocks. That's me in the back with the long hair and the black jacket and maybe the deepest tan I ever had in my life. The lady in the white shirt is Bianca. The lady on the other end in the black shirt with the pink collar is Ashley. And the gentleman in the middle, right, the elderly Asian man, is Mr. Fuji. WWE Hall of Famer, pro wrestling manager, Mr. Fuji. You know how we met him? Bianca and Ashley reached out to him. I think Ashley more than Bianca, but I'll follow up at some point and maybe try to get the full story. But they reached out to him somehow. I wasn't privy to this. But I come in one day, we're gonna do the show, and it's Mr. Frickin' Fuji. Cue all of us squeeing like little kids. Now you may ask yourself, if you're not familiar with me or my history or who this man in the middle is, what brings four girls who were in their 20s at the time, so this was the mid 2000s, I would say between 05 and 07, because that's when I was in college, at least in the community college, which is where this was taken. So what brings three girls who are in their 20s and an elderly man who's got to be in his 60s, if not 70s by that point, together in a room to talk? What brings a black girl, technically biracial, but no one's going to know that looking at me without me saying it. So what brings a black girl, two Latino women, and an Asian man together to talk? With all these differences, right? The age gap, the gender differences, the ethnicity differences, with all these differences between us, what, pray tell, brought us together? Pro wrestling. A love of pro wrestling. We did a pro wrestling themed web radio show where we talked about what was going on at the time. We gave our opinions on various things. They somehow found Mr. Fuji and they reached out to him. He accepted. He came in and he told us wonderful stories about his life and about Mr. Fuji. He is Mr. Fuji. About Yokozuna, who was actually a Samoan dude. You look at him now, it's like, how in the world did he ever pass as a Japanese guy? But again, I was a kid. I didn't know the difference. But it's this, I to this day consider this to be one of the coolest moments of my life, right? As silly as I may look standing behind everyone with my arms out, right? I consider this to be one of the absolute coolest moments of my life. And this would not have been possible if we were not different. We were all different, right? If we had those barriers up, he probably wouldn't have responded, or Bianca and Ashley wouldn't have reached out. We could have allowed all these different barriers, right? These potential barriers to separate us, to keep us apart. But we didn't. And we had a wonderful time. You know why? Because we had one thing, a common love that brought us together. Pro wrestling. We were pro wrestling fans. He had been in the business for most of his life. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. And again, it's still one of the coolest moments of my life. And I have been to many a wrestling show. I've been to a few live events since then. But this is still one of the coolest moments of your life. How many people get to say they met Mr. Fuji? How many people get to say that he came to you? You didn't go to him. He came to you. Not too many people can say that. But Bianca and Ashley and I, we can say that. And that's because for all of our differences, in the end, we were all four people who really, really, really loved pro wrestling. Right? So that's pretty much the video. I hope you're all doing well. I hope that you continue to do well. If you're not doing well, I hope and pray you will do well. And I'm going to end this video with showing you a picture of my favorite white male. My beloved kitty RJ. Look how cute he is. Look at that belly. Actually, this is the first picture I ever took of him. This is the night that he was rescued, that I rescued him, or rather he just walked into the door, threw himself on the bed, which was my bed at the time, and fell asleep, and he never left. So I want to end this video on a positive note and on a very cute image. So I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye.